Let's get joined up. Today's show is brought to you by Audible, and right now you can get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/joined-up. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle or MP3 player. So thanks for tuning in to the Joined Up Writing Podcast, a regular show about all things writing, including interviews with authors, screenwriters, and key figures from the publishing industry, plus loads of hints, tips, and inspiration for all kinds of creatives. You can follow us on Twitter at JU Podcast, leave a quick iTunes review, or just tell a friend. Right, cue that cheesy theme tune.
Put down your pen and stop your typing. Grab yourself a drink, cause it's Joined Up Writing.
Hello and welcome to the Joined Up Writing Podcast, where a little procrastination can, and often does, go a long way. I'm Wayne Kelly and it's episode 119 with Rosanna Amaka telling us about her highly original debut novel, The Book of Echoes, and her fascinating journey into writing and eventual publication. A quick catch up from me before that, and I've got to be honest, it's been busy to the state of almost being a crazy few weeks that's included a trip to LA as part of a production team that made a short comedy film last year. We were attending the Hollywood International Moving Pictures Film Festival, held at Raleigh Studios, which is Charlie Chaplin's old studio, and managed to bag the award for Best International Comedy Dramedy. I worked as director and editor on the project, and it was great fun to be there celebrating with many of the other cast and crew, including co-writer Maria Smith, who's a previous guest of the show as well, so it was brilliant. Whilst I was there, I managed to catch up in person with a recent guest of the show, screenwriter David Warple, and we had a brilliant chat about ongoing projects, TV and all things screenwriting. Didn't record it, unfortunately. It wasn't that kind of thing, it was just a nice casual chat. But I also fully intended to meet another friend of the show and yet to be guest, Jim Snell, but circumstances conspired against us on this flying trip, so really sorry we couldn't make it happen this time, Jim, but I hope to be returning at some point in the not too distant future. Pre-production is continuing on another horror short that I hope to make in the summer, and amazingly I've got another US trip coming up thanks to my latest short film, Inkling, which has been selected to play as part of the Horror Hound Film Festival in Cincinnati next month. The Horror Hound Film Convention, for those of you who don't know, is the biggest dedicated horror convention in America, and it's such a privilege to have my little film screened at the film festival part of it. So are there any listeners hoping to attend the festival? Drop me a line, let me know, because it'd be great to meet some more of you in person. In other writing news, I've returned to the sitcom project I've been co-writing with comedian John Pearson. He had loads of constructive feedback from another guest of the show, Merle Nygate, who had spent time as a BBC script editor, so, it was great feedback. It's taken us a while to mull all of that over, but now we've got a deadline for the BBC Writers' Room, which is accepting comedy scripts for the next few weeks. So it's time to whip up a new draft, get it into shape, and submit the script. So all of that, and I've still been outlining an idea for a TV series based on my short film, Inkling. So that's what I've been up to, which admittedly is more than usual, but what about you? Any projects big or small? Any questions for future shows? Let me know and get in touch by tweeting me at JU Podcast or emailing Wayne at WayneKellyWrites.com. That's Wayne at WayneKellyWrites.com because, I'd love to hear from you. Also, don't forget to join the email mailing list at joinedupwriting.co.uk to get free stuff and to be the first to find out about upcoming shows and events. And finally, please tell someone else about the show. If you're a regular listener, or maybe you've just stumbled on it, whatever, it doesn't matter. I cannot tell you how helpful it is to me and to the prospect of being able to keep the show going into its 7th year and beyond that you spread the word. So share it on social media or just tell a few people with your actual mouth. It's old-fashioned, but it's highly effective. And once you've done all that, leave me a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher or Spotify, because that massively increases the visibility of the show for other people. So anyway, right, I'll stop going on about all that. Let's crack on with today's interview with Rosanna Amaka. So Rosanna was born to African and Caribbean parents and began writing the Book of Echoes 20 years ago to give voice to the Brixton community in which she grew up. As a child, she loved writing short stories, later progressing to novels, which, as you'll hear, she spent many years crafting. So published by Doubleday, The Book of Echoes is her first novel, and it's out right now on Kindle, with the paperback hitting shelves on February the 27th. Enjoy the conversation. So, hi Rosanna, appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. So why don't you start off just by telling us where you're speaking from and telling us a little bit about how things are going?
I'm speaking from my home in London, and things are going fine. It's a good day. I woke up and it's been a good day.
That's good. Have you been doing some writing today?
I have been clearing out some paperwork, but also doing some writing. But it's been mainly focusing on paperwork.
Yeah, well, you've got to clear the decks sometimes so that you can actually get on with the creative stuff. I know what that's like. I understand, no problem. So, so why don't you start off just by telling us a little bit about your debut Book of Echoes?
Okay, the Book of Echoes is a book that is narrated by an enslaved African woman from over 200 years ago. And she was captured in Africa. And West Africa, and in the process of being captured, she tosses her son into a shrine, and also she loses another child here in the London docks. So it's basically her being haunted by the loss of her children and wanted to find those children, and her ghost roams the world trying to find them. And in the process, over time, she starts to come across other people, and she comes across Ngozi, who's in Nigeria, and she comes across Michael, who is in Brixton in London.
Yeah, it's such an original kind of setup, and the way you've got like dual narratives going on, and obviously a big timeline and everything else. So, where did the idea come from in the first place? What was kind of the jumping off point for you?
I had various ideas roaming around in my head, but over 20 years ago, I was working in Scotland. And at the time, I didn't have a TV. So I thought, okay, I'm going to sit down and put pen to paper. And in the process of putting pen to paper, I decided that I actually wanted to give voice to the community that I grew up in. Mainly because a lot of the novels that were around at the time, I didn't feel reflected that community. So I wanted to write about that community, and these are the stories that came out of that process.
Yeah. Well, why don't we go back a little bit? Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and kind of those kind of experiences, and maybe some of the stories that you wanted to reflect?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm of... my mother is Nigerian, and my father is Jamaican. And although I grew up in Brixton, I have spent time in Nigeria. So I just wanted to bring some of those experiences to life in the book.
That sounds great. And was it as much a kind of voyage of discovery for you as well? Because as you say, you're brought up in Brixton, so, and you know, I appreciate you probably visited Nigeria and everything, but kind of, did you learn a lot in the process of writing the book yourself? Was it a case of you got to rediscover a lot of this stuff?
Well, some of the stories are, unfortunately, my grandmother on my father's side passed away from cancer. But before she passed away, I used to sit with her and ask her about where she came from, and you know, because it was my grandparents that came over. So I used to ask her, where did she come from? And also my grandmother on my mother's side, before she passed away, I was asking her questions about where did we come from, what was her journey. So all those things kind of converged into the book.
Although I haven't read Book of Echoes yet, from what you've described about your protagonist, do you think there's a certain element of that that's reflected in your protagonist? This idea that this, I mean, as it sounds like from how you've described it, it's a soul, a ghost, however you want to describe it, but that's travelling across time and through these different cultures and things. Do you think that's kind of reflected in your own experiences to a certain extent?
Well, yeah, I suppose so, because I've spent most of my adult life traveling and most of my adult working abroad. Well, not most of my adult life, but quite a substantial amount of my adult life working abroad. So, and observing people. So maybe that comes through in the narrator as well.
Yeah. So was Book of Echoes kind of the first book that you thought to write, or did you try, like lots of other writers and lots of authors, published authors that I speak to, it's often their kind of debut is not the first book that they wrote, or it might be the first one that they finished, but it's not always the first one that they tried to write. Was that the case for you?
It's the first book that I started to write, and I abandoned it and went to other books, but kept coming back.
And so that probably speaks to the power of it and the fact that it just kept drawing you back in.
Definitely. I couldn't let it go.
Well, that's great. Were you worried, because, as you say, it is quite an original approach to how you've approached it, and with the various timelines and I suppose a touch of kind of magical realism, or whatever you want to call it. Was there ever a point when you were writing it, or when you'd written it, that you were worried about it maybe being a little bit too different or a little bit out there for publishers? Lots of people talk a lot of the time about publishers being relatively safe, and they want something that's like something else that they've heard before. How did you, or was it just a case of you just had to write it?
As I said, I wrote it in 6 months. So I think I was enjoying writing the book too much to actually think about publishers. Because when I started to write it, I didn't think about publishers. I was just writing something. I was enjoying the process and enjoying the story. It's only when I started to pull it together and edit it and then start sending it out to the world that I started getting knocked back, saying, well, maybe this is too big a story, or can't you just narrow it down? So it's when I started getting the feedback that I started to realize, oh, actually, maybe this isn't what the publishers want, but this was the story that I wanted to tell.
And how did you feel when you started to get some of that feedback? Did you waver? Was there a time when you thought, did you even consider, sort of changing it or altering the vision that you'd kind of already put on paper?
I never wavered on the actual story, but I wavered on actually following it through in terms of trying to get it published. But every time I wavered, my mother would say to me, "You've got to get that book published."
Well, that's great. So you've kind of got that cheerleader there for you. And it's like a lot of these things. It sounds like the very thing that puts some publishers off, and will always put people in the industry off, or whatever, is actually its biggest strength. It's the fact that it is different, and you have told it in a unique way, and it's in your very unique voice, or whatever.
Yeah, I told it the way that it came out, and the way that I felt that it needed to be told. So hopefully, people appreciate it. But it's a story that I had to tell. Everybody has a story that they have to tell, but this is the one that I had to tell.
So what's your earliest memory of writing in general? When did you think, I'd actually like to quite have a go at writing, or was it never a conscious thing? It was just something that you did?
I never had the confidence, actually, to think, I could write. It was something that I did right from an early age, but I never thought of writing because academically I was always pushed towards the sciences and maths and that area. That was supposed to be my where my talents lied. So I thought, this isn't for me, and I went down that route. So that's why I went into engineering. But I was always writing.
Always in the background. Was it kind of a guilty pleasure almost?
It was a way of getting through life.
Yeah. And did you find that, obviously, in addition to writing your books and things, did you journal? Did you do, what other kinds of writing did you do?
I journaled. I used to write from a very, very early age. I used to write songs, which I look back at now and read, which were poems. I laugh at now because it's, for such a young child, I was I was thinking about the problems of the world.
Quite earnest, yeah. I think everybody goes through that, though, to be fair. It does. Well, it's just a way of expressing yourself, isn't it? But yeah, you look back sometimes and you think, why was I so serious?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's great that you've obviously got that passion for it. And did you write short stories as well before you wrote Book of Echoes?
Yes, I did.
And so tell me a little bit about your actual journey to publication. So you explained that you kind of got some knockbacks initially with it. What was the breakthrough for you?
So, as I said, I wrote it within 6 months over 20 years ago and got a whole load of rejections. And I kept redrafting it, re-editing it, rewriting it. And I finally decided, okay, in 2017, this was going to be it. I was going to, push it out there, and I pushed it out there again and got rejections again. And then I said, okay, my mum said, whatever happens, you got to get this published. So I said, okay, I'm going to self-publish it. And that's when I started to listen to Joanne Penn.
Yeah.
It was very
creative
inspirational.
Penn. Yeah, absolutely.
So I followed her advice on many of the YouTube that she's done, and I decided, okay, I'm going to self-publish this book. But just before I was going to go down the self-publish, I got my ISBN number together, and I was ready to put the title to it and everything else. I came across one of the rejection letters, and I read it. And at the bottom of it, it said, keep in touch. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to self-publish anyway. Have I got anything to lose? So after this was a letter that was written to me over 20 years ago. Wow. And so I said to myself, okay, just phone up and leave a message. So I phoned up the number. It was still there. Obviously, the code had changed slightly. So I phoned it up and got through and left a message and said, oh, my name's such and such. He said I should keep in touch. And I'm just phoning up to let you know what I'm doing. And then I think it was the secretary that phoned me back and said, what am I talking about? So So I said, oh, I've got this letter here that was sent to me 20 years ago.
They probably thought you were a crazy person.
Yeah. She said, and then she said to me, oh, can you send this letter? So I said, oh, okay, well, I'm going to send you a copy of the letter, but in the process, have a look at these 3 chapters as well. So I sent off the letter and the 3 chapters, and I didn't hear anything for about 3 months. I just assumed it was just another rejection. Mm-hmm. So I sat down and I was just about to sort out the Amazon and all the rest of it and just press. And I got an email in saying, I've just read these chapters. Can you send me the synopsis? I sent off the synopsis. They got back to me straight away and said, she said to me, I'm going to pass you on to somebody else. And they passed me on to Francine Toon, who helped me find an agent. So I ended up with the Good Literary Agents, thank God. Mm-hmm. Because they helped a great deal, and my agent Nikki Chan, and from there they found me Doubleday. Mm-hmm. So it just fell into place after 20 years.
And how did that feel after such a long lead up?
I felt like I was in a dream, to be honest with you, because even though I had contacted the person, even though I'd read this letter and I thought, oh, what have I got to lose? I thought in the back of my mind, well, I'm going to self-publish. Mm-hmm. But because it happened, so it's like it didn't happen for 20 years and then it happened quickly.
It's a 20-year overnight success.
I was amazed. I was like in a daze. That actually did, that somebody did. That I actually got an agent, as I said, the Good Literary Agency, and they found me a publisher.
It's amazing. So I suppose in a way, the fact that you kind of embrace the idea of self-publishing and you were going to go down that route, and you'd kind of taken control of your own destiny. It was sort of freeing in a way.
Yeah, it was, but I knew it was going to be a hard route to take. Because I had contacted a few people to get, when you say self-publishing a book, the faces that you get back are like, oh,
yeah. What? Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, explain that to people, because again, it's a conversation that's kind of come up on the podcasting before. Because I definitely think that self-publishing is so far ahead of where it was even sort of 5 years ago or whatever. And there are there's loads of really, really great self-published books, but as you say, but they're not self-published in the sense of one person writes a book, does like a couple of drafts and then hits send and it's sorted. They've been heavily edited, and there's usually some proper cover design in there, and it's not that dissimilar to traditional publishing. It's just that you've had to go through all the hoops and you've had to do it all yourself, to be successful.
And there's a lot of prejudice out there.
Oh, completely. Yeah.
When you say self-publishing.
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, because there is still the other side of it, the side that I've just mentioned, where somebody writes something, they don't even check it for typos, let alone do an actual edit on it or anything, and then they'll just pop it up on Amazon. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, they're the self-published books that they might come across. Yeah. And as you say, so if you say that to somebody, they think, oh right, I see. Or vanity. A lot of people associate it with vanity publishing as well, which is another thing entirely. So so it's tricky, and obviously then you've also got to do all. You've got to tell people about it. You've got to somehow get people to find it and everything else, which I know there's still an element of that when you're traditionally published anyway.
But it's a lot harder.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, completely. So there was a massive relief. And was it a case of, obviously Book of Echoes is just about to come out, isn't it? Is that right? Is it come out in
It's the 27th of February it comes out.
Okay, so we're recording this in January, so it's coming out pretty soon. So presumably, I don't know, you can tell me, are you working on another book, a follow-up or something different?
Yes, I am. I'm writing the second one.
Brilliant. And is it a sequel or is it something else?
It's something else, but yeah.
I'm guessing it's too early to talk about, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But you, and was that something at the point that you were, you got picked up by your agent and everything else? Had you already got this book on the go, this other project?
No, I hadn't. I had got other books, but this is another one that's calling me. So
you're answering the call. That's good.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that then. So I know you can't tell us necessarily, it's probably too early to tell us about this other book that you're writing specifically, but if you're sitting down to write another book tomorrow, have you found that you've approached this book, the one that you're now writing, are you approaching the writing of that differently to the way that you wrote Book of Echoes, or have you grown in confidence? Tell me how the experience has been different so far.
It's been different because I've learnt quite a lot from going through the process of the Book of Echoes. So I'm using some of that experience and some of the things that I didn't do so well and some things that I did well. I'm using that experience to help me write the second book a lot faster. And
what sorts of things were they? What sorts of things changed from the first book to the second, do you think?
Well, the second book, for me, this is my own outlook, is a totally different book. But it's just a process of writing that I think that I've learnt from going through the Book of Echoes, that I'm bringing that experience into the second book to make it easier.
So did you plan with Book of Echoes? Did you plan, or did you just start writing and see where it went? Or
it was one of those things that just organically came out.
And as a consequence, did you find it was obviously you had a long gestation period with Book of Echoes over the time. You wrote it in 6 months, but then, as you say, you had like this 20-year period or whatever. And in that period, did you find that you were the edits and the rewrites pretty major? Is the book that you have now, is it very, very different to that book that you'd first written, or is it sort of the essence of it is pretty much the same?
I think the best way to describe it is that I wrote the skeleton in 6 months and then put the meat on in under 20 years.
Yeah, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you sat down to write your second book, did you approach it differently from the point of view? Did you plan it out before you started writing? Did you kind of do a beat sheet? Did you do a chapter plan? Did you have how did you approach that as regards the story and the structuring of it?
I'm still writing it, so
Yeah.
it's both, but yeah, it's both. But I'm still trying to enjoy the Book of Echoes.
Yeah, I know it's always this thing though, is it? It's a bit like with films or anything else. It's like by the time the things are actually coming out, it's kind of, I mean, for you particularly, because you actually originally wrote it a long time ago, but by the time the thing comes out, you've been living with it for a long time, and you're kind of on, mentally, you're on to the next thing as regards the creative part.
I'm not. I am in terms of what I'm writing, but I actually love the Book of Echoes so much that I'm still enjoying it, even though I've lived with it so long.
Well, that's
I'm
great.
still in love with it.
Well, that's good. Well, it's one of your babies at the end of the day.
Is.
It's your first child, which
It's
some
my
people
first
often say is your
child.
favourite. So
It's my it's my first child, and I think that there's a lot that the Book of Echoes has to say. There's so much that the protagonists, Ngozi and Michael, go through. I just love them as characters. They go through mental health, death, fractured family relationships. There's just so much that they go through in that story that you can't help falling in love with them.
yeah, absolutely. So with it, and I know that you're at the start of the process of the second book, but did you find with how of the book of Echoes has come out and it looks like it's going to be successful and everything else, did you feel any sort of pressure with writing I know it's not a follow-on or anything, but it is your second album, if you like, if you think about it in musical terms, that difficult second album. Did you feel, or are you feeling like pressure with it, or are you just still enjoying it for the sake of writing and everything?
I'm enjoying it for the sake of writing. I'm lucky enough that I've got a good publisher that hasn't at the moment put pressure on me, because the Book of Echoes is still coming out, so
Yeah.
I've got time.
Yeah, that's right. So what would you say your other inspirations are? I mean, in terms of it might be other books or authors or films or TV. Mm-hmm. What would you say your other creative inspirations and influences are?
Oh gosh, there's so many. Chinua Achebe, Things Fall Apart. Roddy Dow. I remember reading The Woman Who Walked Into Doors, and that I was like, oh wow, this is a wonderful book. James Baldwin, another amazing writer, classic. Toni Morrison. There's just so many.
So if you were starting again, having gone on this journey, which, is only just starting as regards your actual publishing part of your journey, but you've been on this journey, this creative journey with your writing and everything. So if you were starting out again tomorrow from fresh as a new writer, what, if anything, would you do differently, or what would you go back and tell your younger self?
I would tell my younger self to have more confidence. So I didn't really have confidence in myself in my writing. So a lot of it was hidden. So I used to write, but I didn't share it with anybody. So I'd share a lot earlier and learn a lot earlier. Even though when I wrote, I remember being at school and I think I got second place in a short story. I think I was like 12 or something like that. But I was like, when they called my name, I couldn't believe, I was like, I don't know why I entered it at 12, but I secretly entered this short story competition and didn't expect to get anywhere with it. But I was like amazed, even though for somebody else second, for me, second was like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was kind of the early encouragement. So do you remember, like, when the first, I mean, aside from like the competition, whatever, do you remember when you were a little bit older, who was the first person that you actually showed your writing to, whether that was a short story or it was the early parts of Book of Echoes or whatever? Was it your mum?
No, I think the first person that I showed, who was the first person that I showed my writing to? I think it was I think because I started off writing songs as well.
Yeah,
So
me
I
too.
was okay. I was okay sharing some of those songs, but I wasn't okay sharing my longer pieces.
I see.
Yeah, I
And
don't
with
know
your
what
songs, when you shared them, did you sing them or play them or anything, or were you just literally just lyrics?
I actually had a job when I was 13, a cleaning job,
Mm-hmm.
and they paid me in recording time.
Brilliant.
So I actually have got some recordings of those earlier songs as a 13-year-old.
I think we need that as a podcast bonus, Rosanna. So if you can, if
I
you can
don't
just
think
send those
so.
on.
Too embarrassing.
Well, that's great though. And so, did you record them like with other musicians? Were there musicians on there, or do you play yourself?
I don't play an instrument, but I do sing.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
yeah. So I think that there were other musicians around at the time. As I said, I had a cleaning job in the recording studio, so I got to know quite a few of the other musicians. And when I said to them, "Oh, they're paying me recording time," they kind of gave up some of their time to help me.
oh, that's great. So what would you say has been the most helpful piece of creative or inspirational advice that you've been given along the way?
I think I went to I think was it I listened or went to where Toni Morrison was speaking. I think it was years and years ago. And I remember reading one of her books called The Bluest Eye, and there's so many of her books. And I remember her saying that she rewrote her book around 6 or 8 times before she let it out into the world. And I thought, what if Toni Morrison is going to rewrite or
Mm-hmm.
6 to 8 times, then I can rewrite as many times as to get it right.
Absolutely, and I think that's probably something from the outside when people first start writing that a lot of people don't really take account of or don't realise the amount of rewriting and editing that goes into a book or a story or whatever piece of writing it is. I think they think, well, you kind of go through it for typos or something, and then that's that sort of thing. I think that is kind of that is a big surprise, isn't it, when you first start learning a bit more about writing?
Yes.
And so did you?
It's an enjoyable process as well, I find.
Yeah, I do. Although not everybody does. I mean, I know I speak to a lot of authors and they hate the edit. But yeah, I like the idea. I always think of it as you're sort of tightening it up, and it's kind of getting better, and it works better, and kind of everything fits together a bit better. I like it, and I really like doing it with an actual red pen. Sometimes printing stuff out and doing it, I always get like more enjoyment out of doing it like that. But lots of people don't.
I suppose the way that I see it is it's a bit like an artist that's actually creating a sculpture. You do your first round, and then you come and then you chisel away again, and you keep chiseling away until that sculpture starts to come out more and more and more and more. That's how I see the writing process.
Absolutely, until you hit it too hard and the whole thing just falls apart, and then you have to put it back together again.
Yep.
Yeah, we've all been there. So, so Book of Echoes comes out end of February, towards the end of February.
7th of February.
Yeah,
it's out on Amazon at the moment,
so people
so
can
it can be
that.
pre-ordered.
Brilliant.
Also Waterstones, you can get it from Waterstones, and you can pre-order from there as well. And
Excellent. And have you found that? Have you started doing all the kind of new author things that you have to do? Obviously, this type of thing being one of them. Have you been doing panels and stuff like that? How have you found all that stuff?
It's very new to me, so I'm starting to do them, but yeah, it's very new to me. So I will learn as I go along.
Yeah, well, that's the best way, and have fun, hopefully, as well.
Exactly. That's what it's mainly. Well, that's how I see it. I think that's, if you're not enjoying it, what's the point?
Absolutely. Well, just before we wrap up then, so I'm sure there's loads and loads of people listening to this that have got a very similar background to you from the point of view they've written something, they might have written something a long, long time ago. They might not have confidence in it, or they think, why should I bother with it, or why should I stick with it? What would be your advice to those people now if they're sitting on a story that they think they should tell?
I think I think if they in your heart of heart, when you got something that you need to tell, and if you need to tell it to the world, then you've got to get it out there.
Absolutely. Well, let's hope that on the back of that, we'll be speaking to lots more people who've got similar stories, and they can, they've got your patience and your perseverance, because it's a great story from that point of view, and it's really inspiring. And good luck with Book of Echoes as well. Where can people find more about you online?
I think Penguin, .co.uk or .com has got information about me. The Good Literary Agency has got information about me, so goodliteraryagency.co.uk. I also have my own website. Just in the last, I think, 2 weeks, I've gone onto Twitter. So yeah, Twitter account as well.
Oh, brilliant. Everyone listening, go and make sure you go and follow Rosanna. And good luck with the book. And and
it's a Rosanna Amaka if they're looking for me on Twitter.
Yes.
Amaka.
Brilliant. And I'll make sure I put that in the show notes as well.
All right.
But for now, thanks a million. It's been great to talk to you. Hopefully be able to come back on when the next book, whatever that is,
before, hopefully. I've enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, likewise. Likewise. It's good, and good luck with it. I look forward to seeing how everything pans out for you as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks again to Rosanna Amaka, and you should definitely check out her website, blog and Twitter, and I'll put all of those links in the show notes over at joinedupwriting.co.uk. That's it for this week, but don't forget you can find the entire back catalogue of interviews on the website. Don't forget to keep chatting about this to your friends and anyone else that you think might enjoy the show. Make sure you subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Overcast, or wherever else you get your podcasts from, and then you can have the podcast downloaded automatically every time. Also, remember to get in touch with all your writing news, views, questions, or comments, and I'll give you a mention in a future show. The next episode is an inspiring chat with crime and steampunk author Rod Duncan, who overcame dyslexia to be a highly successful, multi-published author, so that's a great chat. Until then, thanks for listening. I'm Wayne Kelly. Happy writing and reading, and I'll see you next time.